Hey there, it's Jennifer. We are in week 5, and this week we covered the friend at midnight. But in my time with you today, I'd like to take an interesting little side detour, so I encourage you to stay with me on this. I don't know about you, but if you ever attended summer camp or had archery at all in school, you may have learned how to shoot a bow and arrow. And it takes a little bit of skill, it takes a lot of practice, and you have to try time and time again. So we were always focusing on a target. And the target, if you want to visualize with me, it's smaller in the middle. That is the goal. A little bit wider area. It was usually a different color. It's worth a few less points, but it's also still valuable. And then you had the wider area, which was a fairly good attempt, or you could have missed the target altogether, which happened to me quite a bit. So, but the more you practiced, the better you got, the more consistent you were with it, and you would be able to hit a target over and over again, or at least come pretty close to where you were aiming for. So, I've heard the saying of there is a hope for our calling. That we do know God's word shares that he has a plan and a purpose for us. But have you ever heard it said that he has a hope for our calling? That he knows what he hopes to get to do in our life. But he's also not going to push his will onto us. And there are times that there are things that we'll miss. There are blessings that we miss. There's opportunities and experiences because of our free will. And we didn't choose what he felt was best for us. So I kind of think about that a little bit as it pertains to this target, right? So you have that center area. That is God's perfect will for our life. That is where when he speaks, we obey. When we keep him as our main focus, and the things we choose to say and do bring him glory. It takes time, it takes practice, it takes persistence and perseverance to be able to hit that mark each time, but we know the value of it, and that's always the goal. Then the next ring out, that's considered God's permissive will. Now, these are the things that he allows us to pursue in our life, even though it isn't really his perfect will for us. So these still can be things that serve others. We might want to do our version of things. We might not fully obey, but partially obey. I did most of what you said to do. This is where we insert ourselves into a lot of his plan, his purpose, and what he had laid out for us. I would say a large percentage of Christians live in this realm, that we're trying to do our best, but that's exactly it. We are trying, right? We are putting our effort into it instead of allowing God to be God in us and getting us moved into the perfect will scenario. So the third realm is the surrendered will. Now, that is an area where Romans 7 describes that at some point, if we continue to pursue sin and our choices and a world outside of God, he will give us too what we so desperately seem to want. The thought of that for me is terrifying. I've always felt like I'm like 3 bad choices away from a life I used to lead, and that is not an acceptable alternative for me. Do you ever feel that way? This is that space where we don't honor the things of God, that we don't really actually consider God at all. Whether it's us, whether it's others, so many people live in that space. Some of them are unbelievers. Some of them are believers that just say, I know a better way, and I'm going to prioritize the things I want to do and the things I want to accomplish over what God may have for me. It is really tempting to think that people in that far end of the target would be a lost cause. They don't see the value of God. They don't follow him. They don't pursue him. But no one is a lost cause. So it just takes a little bit of perseverance, persistence, and training that, just like an archer with a bow and arrow, we can move from the outer realms of the target into God's perfect will. He has that for us. He doesn't just say, okay, well, they didn't pursue it, so I don't want what's best for them anymore. He will always love you. He will always want what's best for you. And he is always ready for you to come back to him in that. So what does any of this have to do with a friend of midnight? Well, in that story, a friend had an unexpected visitor that came from out of town. And in their culture, it would have been dishonoring to not have presented them a meal. But because he had no idea that they were coming, he was completely unprepared for it. So he ran out to his friend's house. His family had all already gone to bed. It was a disruption, to say the least. But he kept knocking on the door, because he knew that what he needed to gather from that friend would bring honor to this unexpected guest. He had a more specific reason behind it. He wasn't just saying, oh, I'm bored, or hey, let's go do something fun. He was trying to do the right thing. And his persistence paid off. That not the first time, not the second time he asked, but consistently and without fail kept asking the friend, I need these things. And his friend rewarded that persistence, not only giving him what he asked for, but more in return. So that is so much God in this. Just like that persistent archer, he moved from the outer realms of a surrendered will to a permissive will, to a perfect will, and hit it every time because he wanted that. He knew that that was going to be honoring to God, that he knew this was the best plan. So not only does that persistence pay off, God is a God of abundance. And just like the friend at midnight, the friend blessed him with so much more than he had even asked for. And that is God's plan and purpose for us as well. To be seeking his perfect will in our life will be so much more fruitful than we can possibly think or imagine. So, you ready to start practice? I know that we can do it. Let's keep God as that focus and that main target. Be blessed.